was the ideal opportunity to prove the Royal Navy can still turn out in strength east of Suez under its own steam. But it also provided the commandos with specialist training facilities alongside friendly Asian nations, demonstrating Britain's commitment to peace in the region. This, then, is how it seemed from inside the amphibious task group. Life on Ocean Wave 97. It all started back in Portsmouth in January, the sheer slog of preparing a task force for a prolonged operation. For the families, the sadness of separation. For the logistics teams, after a year of planning, full steam ahead. Fast jets, nuclear submarines and commandos are just some of the assets involved. Brunei, Malaysia, South Africa, just some of the countries. The Navy's objective is to practice being a self-sustaining force in new waters and different climes. Interest in the exercise from the Asia-Pacific region has been widespread, not least because of commercial links with Britain.
There are two parts to this. One is for the Navy to show that we can operate at ranges from the United Kingdom, self-supporting and maintain our operational effectiveness. That, I believe, is important. The importance of it was shown during the Falklands, and I think you can never predict when it's going to be needed. The world is a very dangerous place. I believe in that maxim, speak quietly but walk with a big stick, and we're the big stick for that. In terms of value for money for UK Limited, in sales and things, stability around the world must be of value for a country where 26% of our GDP is with trade, which is probably more than most of the large European countries, twice as much as, say, in Japan, for example. And it does show the best of British, and it does help us in terms of jobs, investment, sales, not just defence sales, but all sorts of sales, and I think that's good value for money.
The deployment includes 3 major exercises. Setia Kawan 2 in Brunei involves the largest amphibious force seen in the region for 25 years. 40 commando are committed for the whole deployment, to be joined at times by 4, 5 and Brigade HQ. More used to training at company level, this is their chance to exercise as a group, with all the gunners, engineers and logistics that make up the support elements.
From my point of view, this is a marvellous opportunity to get the entire commando group together for a 7-month period, all heading towards exactly the same culminating point. So it is important to do that occasionally, of course. Individual training and subunit training is very important, but sometimes you have to bring the whole thing together to prove you can do it as a unit.
But the length of this deployment is particularly hard on 40 Commando, after their 6-month Northern Ireland tour last year, though for some it's just what they signed up for. Certainly, as final preparations for sailing are made, feelings on board are mixed.
A heavy heart. I left my wife and my family back in Cornwall, tears and all the rest of it last night. But yes, I'm looking forward to it. I've never been Far East before, and we've got quite a few exercises going on. We're heading up into the sun, and my wife's coming out in Singapore as well, so I'm looking forward to that. But yes, I'm looking forward to the deployment.
Recently just been engaged, so I'm missing my fiancée quite a bit. But she's at home now. She didn't want to come down, a bit too upset. Miss the family and friends, but as I say, once in a lifetime opportunity, so.
Suggestions linking the task force deployment with the handover of Hong Kong in June have been vigorously denied. But if this is not a show of strength to China, the military manoeuvres in the Far East will certainly be seen by countries in the region as a stabilising influence. HMS Fearless is a key player on Ocean Wave 97. She's the flagship for both the Commodore Amphibious Warfare and the Brigadier of 3 Commando Brigade, and she's carrying an embarked force of around 400 Marines. The task group is practicing its vital long-range capabilities. The Royal Navy, one of only a few worldwide, able to sustain itself at sea for weeks on end. Today's refuelling is almost too easy. Fearless is quite capable of doing the same operation at night in far worse sea states than this, and it's just one of the many tasks on board.
Clearly a lot of work has to go on all the time to make sure the ship is functioning. It's a huge community. At the moment, as we speak, we've got about 900 people embarked, and keeping them fed and watered, as well as the ship operating, the landing craft, the helicopters, all takes a lot of work on a daily basis.
With much of the space on board taken up by a giant dock, personal space is at a premium, and sailing into tropical waters has made the atmosphere even cosier. The intense heat is the biggest discomfort on board. The deck that I'm standing on is hot enough to fry an egg on, but compared to some of the working areas down below, this is a breeze. This is the beating heart of HMS Fearless. The enormous steam turbine engines produce a top speed of over 21 knots and 1,500 kilowatts of domestic power for the ship. With temperatures here around 130 degrees, the engine room is like a vision of hell.
It can be quite tense at times. It's pretty cool out there at the minute. When the temperature does get up, and if you ever do have a problem out there and you're out in the space for 2 or 3 hours, and you do know you've been out there by the time you come off watch, when you come out of there you're totally soaked, wet through with sweat, very tired, very drained.
The technology may be old, but Fearless manages to keep pace with the newer gas turbine ships in the group, thanks mainly to the skill and the pride of her engineers.
This is my third visit to an LPD, and to be honest with you, I quite like it. I've had 30 years in the Navy and I've had nothing but steamships, so I quite enjoy it on here. Although it is hard work, especially for the lads, you do get the benefits from it, i.e. job satisfaction.
And if you can't stand the heat, steer well clear of the galley, where cooking 3 hot meals a day for up to 1,000 people produces a steam bath atmosphere. Menus and quantities are planned by 2 experienced chief cooks, and meal times are a useful gauge for measuring morale on board.
Oh yes. Yeah, if people are unhappy, the first thing they complain about is the food. The next thing they complain about is the mail, because there isn't any, and it takes a while to get out to us, which often isn't the ship's fault, but yeah, they all complain about the food. But I don't think they really mean it, because a lot come back and say thank you.
Good runs ashore and regular mail are the mainstays of high morale, and on a long deployment it's impossible to have both all the time. Hobbies are essential.
Apart from anything else, it stops you getting bored. That's the reason I do it, and I like to keep fit myself in any case. It stops the gremlins from setting in, I suppose.
When you get time off, you've just got to keep yourself occupied, otherwise you go mad. I mean, we train, write mail home and things. A lot of people have got their own little hobbies, a lot of people bird watching and so on. Yeah, it's not so bad.
And Fearless does have a certain knack of drawing crew members back time after time.
I've got a funny feeling now. I think I've got Fearless tattooed across my bum now, so it's going to be round again, because there's not many steam-trained people around now. So you see me going shoreside and then back on here again.
Critics of the ship said she'd never make it across the Atlantic for her part in Exercise Purple Star last year. Those critics are strangely silent now she's cruising her way through another major deployment to the other side of the world. Leave aside for a moment the searing heat and stupefying humidity, and there's something rather familiar about a Brunei Forces camp. The uniforms, the training, the vehicles and the kit are all eerily British. And by the end of exercise Setia Kawan 2, the troops hope to have added another British string to their bow.
It's going very well actually, so we're doing 2 basic evolutions with them, which is the cross-decking from one landing craft to another while they're actually in motion, while they're moving, and also taking of a beach and the retraction from the beach. And they all seem to enjoy themselves and they're doing very well so.
What they lack in know-how, they make up for with enthusiasm. The Royal Brunei Forces might be on their home ground, but they're not in their element, and are more than willing to learn their drills from the British Marines.
Amphibious warfare is a completely new discipline to them, and that's why we're taking it very progressively. Watermanship, swimming doesn't come entirely naturally to them, and therefore I think they're enjoying the training, but finding it quite challenging.
The aim of this cross-training is to prepare the Brunei troops for the role they'll play on exercise Setia Kawan 2. But it's not just watermanship and helicopter drills that they need to familiarise themselves with. Many had never set foot on a ship like Fearless before and were given 2 days on board for the experience. They seem not to notice the shortage of space on a fully laden ship.
It's big, it's nice, yeah, it's quite comfortable anyway, even though it's old, it's quite comfortable. Well, all the Marines are saying it's really cramped on board. There's not much space, but you're okay, yeah?
Yeah, because it depends on our size. We are small, but they're big. You know, the size. So it's okay for us. Even for the small bunk, we feel comfortable. Fits all our body.
The name of the forthcoming exercise, Setia Kawan, means loyal friendship in Malay. As Brunei has just recently signed contracts with British defence firms for the provision of offshore patrol vessels, this joint exercise will merely be cementing an already firm relationship.
The training here also has benefits for the Royal Marines. Already practiced in operations on NATO's flanks, they're ever greedy to extend their experience and prove their capability in other parts of the world.
We spent last year off the eastern coast of the United States and in the Caribbean, so we're used to operating all over the world, and this is just another string to our bow, another environment in which to operate.
Later on, the Marines themselves are all at sea, in the jungle. But after 4 months on ship, some would say it's not before time.
Yeah, Jack was getting on our nerves, I must admit. We were getting on his, so it was about time we got ashore and started playing soldiers again.
The rainwater is going to gather on top and eventually get diverted down the stems of the plants and finally into your water bottle.
It's said there's no substitute for a good education, and nowhere is that more true than in the Asian rainforests. At this jungle university, the training team Brunei is teaching Marines how to provide themselves with the basics of survival: food, water, fire and shelter, while avoiding the dangers of heat exhaustion, flash floods, and of course the famous crawling nasties.
Well, what we do is we say, sure, these things are here, so don't get complacent. But what we attempt to do is to prove to them how rarely they will actually come across these particular insects or animals or whatever. In general, in the jungle, everything is scared of you. So as long as you're not actually looking for trouble, everything will avoid you. Snakes will disappear, spiders will go away, centipedes and scorpions will all leave you alone. It's only when you get the soldier who is intent on bullying or annoying animals, baiting pigs or poking scorpions with a stick, that we start to have injuries and people with a problem.
In an open clearing like this, the jungle seems less than threatening. But the TTB insists every man carries emergency items of kit when leaving the area and never goes anywhere alone.
The biggest problem we've got is guys getting lost out here. Navigation is a real problem for them. And they come out here thinking, I can navigate, not a problem. All of a sudden they can't see more than 5 meters at a time. So we insist that whenever somebody moves around the area, they're always in pairs. It's very easy for one man to wander off on his own, become disorientated, and then lose himself. And in fact, we've had people wander off out of a bivvy area like this, only a few hundred yards, to go and collect fruit or to go and get water or whatever, and go missing for a number of days. And the record at TTB, somebody lost, in fact it was a patrol lost, is 8 days. And they were within a 2K area. We knew where they were roughly. We couldn't find them, they couldn't find us, and that took us 8 days.
But even getting lost isn't a complete disaster if you've learned where your next meal could be coming from. Second nature to the Gurkhas stationed in Brunei.
Something like potatoes.
I mean, so like Gurkhas, like me or my friend here working in the TTB, yes, jungles, like here in Brunei jungles or anywhere in the Asian jungle is like supermarket. We can recognize the fruit, we can do something about it.
And a little skillful woodcraft will eventually yield a good supply of fresh meat. Survival isn't for the faint-hearted. Even the Marines flinched at the kill, but had little trouble in digesting the main points of the lesson. But the very nature of the training here makes casualties inevitable. Around 80, mainly heat exhaustion and deadfall injuries, are evacuated from the jungle area every year by another resident unit, 7th Flight Army Air Corps. Their 3 Bell 212 helicopters support the British garrison and the training team. And while the heat and 90% humidity can badly affect flying, the Bristow's-owned aircraft have a suitable pedigree for the job.
They're extremely well adapted. They were designed by the Americans in the 50s, and as a result of that, they were designed specifically for this kind of task. And we find we can outlift and outfly many of the more modern helicopters that are available on the market.
If there's no useful clearing, just finding the casualty's location can be a nightmare. And often a hole needs to be cut in the jungle canopy just to be able to get a winch down. But 7th Flight reckon to be on the spot within 2 hours of a Priority 1 call-out.
Did you touch much on the Lowe's Gully incident?
Okay, old Kinnabaloo, and it was said that at no time did they attempt to make a fire.
Back in class, mistakes of past expeditions are used as a cautionary lesson. These Marines will finish the TTB course with a new confidence in their surroundings, and they'll need it. The next lesson is in jungle warfare. This is the traditional way of directing mortar fire from an observation post overlooking the target. From here, the telltale puffs of smoke are enough for the mortar fire coordinators to calculate adjustments on the rounds, and it's the method that Marines use from Salisbury Plain to Norway's Yerkin Range. But down on the forest floor, the only way to guide fire is by getting a bearing from the sound of a shell's explosion, even if the patrol itself is lost.
Your OC has made an error on his navigation, and he doesn't know where you are. That's always a first, isn't it? So what I want you to do is to start off with a mark mission to confirm your location. And everybody can do this.
The technique is called oral adjustment, and the idea is to have the mortars fire on a known grid reference. The fire coordinators listen to the shot over the net, count the seconds to it landing, and take a bearing on it. The sound and the time are their only references to establish where they want the next shot to be in relation to themselves.
We had a few lectures on ship, and we ran through a couple of practices, just paperwork-wise, and this is the first practical we've done, really, since we've been out here.
Does it take practice, you think?
Oh, definitely. You have to get your ears sorted, because you can see it's all right, but you can't hear anything. It's quite difficult. So you just sit there with your eyes closed. Everybody laughs at you, but it seems to work.
It's an eerie feeling to stand in the trees waiting for a round of high explosives to land somewhere nearby. But it does concentrate the mind on acquiring the skill, as the experts know.
We have to always practice, and practice makes perfect. We know the theoretically, but if we do not practice on the ground, it is quite difficult.
The jungle canopy also acts as a protective cover to a position below, and the rounds need to be fitted with the sort of fuses used in Bosnia to take out damaged houses and penetrate trenches.
The MFC at the other end, obviously where the rounds are going to land, he'll decide whether he needs to use super quick or delayed. Super quick being as soon as it hits the ground, it's going to go off, and delayed, it'll go in a slight distance and go off. Obviously in the jungle, the canopy, the MFC normally is going to use delayed to go through the canopy first, then detonate on the ground.
The mortar troops only have a day to practice oral adjustment, enough to test the theory and their own versatility.
Did you improve?
Well, didn't kill anybody, let's put it that way.
A highly ambiguous answer, given his task. It's not just artillery affected by the dense canopy. The troops operating under its impenetrable skin are effectively cut off from resupply and air support, and radio communication becomes a hit-or-miss affair. On the rainforest floor, more obstacles. Maximum visibility is 25 meters, giving barely enough warning to raise a gun in time. The enemy can be invisible. A patrol can pass a man within feet and never see him. It's hard enough keeping your own oppos in view. Command and control is extremely difficult to maintain, but the challenge is just what some Marines need after 7 weeks on ship.
We went tactical first time, blew a few cobwebs away from most of the guys, got right down in amongst the proper secondary jungle there, and amongst the snarlies, and it was good. Silent routine, nobody talking or anything. Routine worked, good.
Soldiers have been known to maintain themselves in the jungle as a fighting force for months, but just keeping yourself alive makes you vulnerable. This looks like the perfect place for survival. A flowing river, well stocked with fish. But it's also the first place the enemy would look for you. Tension seems to be a feature of jungle fighting. Unable to see very far, the other senses quickly sharpen, straining to pick up any sound, any scent that will give away an enemy. Nerves are tightened to a hair trigger. The idea of a conflict out here is not appealing.
Oh, the absolute nightmare. It's like being on knife edge all the time. You just don't know when the next contact is going to happen. It could happen in 2 seconds' time. So mentally, it's very wearing. I mean, particularly with booby traps, when you start putting those things in, you just don't know whether the next footprint is going to go bang. Booby
traps are both effective and morale sapping. The Viet Cong wrote the book on a whole range of lethal improvised traps, wiring pathways, water bottles, even bodies. A skillfully laid trap is practically undetectable.
If someone is determined to get you, they will get you, you know. I mean, how many routes would you tread on a day? Yet you can put a small device underneath a route and, you know, you can't not tread on routes. It's like you can't not put your feet down. So if someone was determined enough to get you, then they would get you. But hopefully they would set a pattern that you would learn from.
The guys that aren't aware and going into a jungle environment for the first time, being confronted with something like this, and perhaps seeing a friend of theirs get this in the head or the chest, it's obviously going to be very devastating for morale. Probably worse, I'd say, than coming across small arms fire and ambushes and that sort of thing.
But the British forces have a secret weapon that might give their patrols a chance in perfect ambush terrain. A canine early warning system called Jerry Lee.
His infantry patrol dog, he can do two main roles. He can go in front of a patrol and indicate on any ambushes that are out. And also he can be used in the anti-ambush role in the early warning cut-offs. And if there's any enemy patrols coming, he will give advance warning to the remainder of the troops, giving them plenty of time to get ready for the kill shot. In one ambush last year, Jerry gave 5 minutes warning of an ambush coming out. Now normally an early warning cut-off could give a group probably 30 seconds. So that 4.5 minutes is quite a long time for the guys to get ready.
The tracker dog is equally effective. Mungo can follow a man on a scent 36 hours old. Wading through streams won't deceive him, and trying to mask your scent just wastes valuable evasion time.
The biggest thing is time and distance. Put yourself as far ahead as possible and try and annoy the handler to make him not believe the dog, sow the seed of doubt by jumping off the track and making circles, something a person wouldn't actually do.
After their long days in the trees, 40 Commando are happy to go back to sea. It's pretty clear to most of them that the only guaranteed way of coming out alive from a jungle conflict is not to go in the first place. Graduation day at the University of the Jungle. Time to put into practice all the lessons learned during many grueling hours under the baking sun.
The boats that were in contact, talk about contact front now, boats 1 and 2 went out of the killing area to the far side.
Setia Kawan 2 is the biggest exercise Brunei has seen for a decade, pitting 3 Commando Brigades' finest against the resident battalion, 2 Royal Gurkha Rifles, legendary jungle fighters. Cross-decking troops from the logistic ships to HMS Fearless, the first obvious sign of preparations for the landings. In all, around 800 Marines will storm the beaches of Brunei, coming to the aid of a friendly country beleaguered by an oil-hungry, aggressive army. This notional scenario is representative of the many situations 3 Commando Brigade might be called to deal with. Whether it's a Montserrat emergency evacuation or a Falklands campaign, the brigade's role in the Joint Rapid Deployment Force means keeping amphibious skills honed and up to date.
It's always evolving, partly because you get new equipment. I mean, very much we're looking at trying to do things from over the horizon a bit more. You can't do everything from way over the horizon. Sometimes you're going to have to go in close. But as new equipment comes along and new communications and so on, then you can improve and streamline your procedures. But the bottom line is always the same. What you're trying to do is get combat power ashore rapidly, and that's what it's all about.
It's nearly midnight. Down on Fearless's tank deck, the troops are ready to fill the landing craft. There are rumours on board that many of the Special Forces insertions sent out on preceding nights have been compromised. An information leak is suspected. With that in mind, and the prospect of swimming the last metres to shore under 100 pounds of kit, the mood in the dock is decidedly mixed.
I'm confident what we've got to do, but how that's going to work, I don't know. I think it'll go all right. Bound to, aren't we, Marines? Bound to go well.
Our first objective is to take the bridge. Then after that, we should move south, down and form up with 4-5 Commando then. So it should, on the outcome, we're going to try to take the bridge as fast as we can, as in the dark tonight. So then we should have a bit of like 24 hours, 48 hours in that position before we get tasked again.
In fact, the landings are more than successful, with the air-landed 4-5 Commando hooking rounds to cut off the enemy's fallback position. The Marines are soon in possession of their first objectives. The speed and ferocity of their attack caught the enemy wrong-footed.
I'm not sure that they expected the operational tempo to be quite as extreme as it has been. It was the brigade commander's intent to try and take the battle to them, and the training team Brunei and the doctrine of the jungle is things tend to be very tentative and procedural. Now the coastal plain is obviously much more open, and it's more amenable to conventional tactics and mass and momentum. I think they were probably rather overwhelmed by the speed with which things happened. Our battle procedure was cycling at an extremely fast rate.
Good news too from the earlier night insertions. One member of a captured patrol decided an escape and evasion exercise was on the cards after the enemy gave him back his damaged weapon to unload.
They were chatting to each other, probably saying in Gurkhali that this man doesn't clean his weapon often enough. And I decided at that stage that it was time for me to disappear in the opposite direction. Our OP was very close to me at that stage. I knew the ground better than them and was able to get down a small cliff onto the main road and off towards the beach.
The one that got away lost his pursuers in a mangrove swamp, and his ensuing hours on the run were a source of gleeful interest to the rest of the force, not to mention the bemused locals. A river full of crocodiles ended the fugitive's flight. This was, after all, just an exercise. But it's a moot point whether or not he would have survived the escape for real.
It was a good position to get away from, because they wouldn't have been able to fire at me because of the cliff. All they could do was pursue me. I'll leave it to your own imagination as to whether they might have actually caught me with 5.56 as opposed to their own little short legs.
By now, the exercise is 2 days ahead of schedule, but the jungle slows everything down. It suits the Marines to keep close to the only road where their vehicles and Milan weapons might be of some use. The Gurkhas prefer deep jungle, where their field craft makes up for their lack in numbers. The terrain makes little difference to the umpires. Free play means they have no control over strategy. Instead, they have to keep up with developments, much more difficult.
You've got to be able to talk to the enemy umpires on the ground, because you need to know exactly what their intentions are and what they're doing. Otherwise, you turn up and you don't know. You might see some notional stuff on the ground, and you might not know exactly what it is. Therefore, you have to know so that you can make sure that your own troops and the enemy troops obviously play the game.
But free play is the best kind of training, testing the initiative of everyone from the brigadier downwards, keeping up the pressure as the battle evolves.
Puts a lot of pressure on everybody, but that's what they enjoy, and frankly, people would rather be busy than bored.
Has it all gone to plan? Have the things that you expected happened?
Nothing ever goes to plan, and that's the whole point about our game. You plan for uncertainty, you plan for things going wrong. The trick is how you recover for it, and then you regain the advantage.
The final stages of the operation. The last remaining enemy company can only dig in and wait for the inevitable. And while 40 Commando airlifts its troops deeper into the jungle towards their position, the besieged force hastily deals with its real-life casualties. Their last helicopter landing site has already been captured. The middle of the river provides the only winch hole in the canopy. Gurkhas are generally held to be the experts in jungle warfare, even though the rainforest is no more a natural environment to them than to any other British soldier. But even with a disadvantage in numbers and desert cams that do anything here but camouflage, they hold on to the conviction that Marines might be kings of the coast, but they're second best here in the sticks.
As we are Gurkha, living in the jungle, doing much training, even in the jungle, we feel ourselves are the best.
But they face another major disadvantage. Gurkha jungle warfare includes a variety of lethal weapons and traps that would slow down anyone with an ounce of survival instinct. Unfortunately, these methods are far too lethal to use on an exercise, even a free play one.
It will definitely hurt them once we have set up booby traps, mines, or things like traps, yeah. But for this exercise, we haven't actually put any booby traps out and any human traps, things like that, because they are quite, dangerous.
Safety is always paramount on exercises, especially in the use of explosives. The rules of engagement in the scenario, however, do just occasionally seem to get overlooked.
We filmed a load of prisoners of war in a similar scenario to the way that prisoners of war were handled in Bosnia, in that we put them on what we thought would be key targets for 3 Commando Brigade to try and stop them using their indirect fire and their air to destroy us there.
Did it work?
No, it didn't work. They completely destroyed Anduki, and we had prisoners of war there.
Now, with the Marines closing in on all flanks, both sides are taking the opportunity to indulge in a little psychological warfare.
They took up a position on the high ground to the north and started shouting across to us with a loud hailer that we were to surrender, that this wasn't our war and we were to go home. It was great for our morale, but I think in reality it would have been quite damaging. In return tonight, we've put a couple of lights out on the river to the east of our position, and we've also made a dummy in tropical combats in their uniforms, situated in a position just on the edge of the lights. Hopefully what this will do is create a bit of interest and bring the enemy down to have a look. We've got it covered by gunfire, and we've also got a few trip flares out.
And finally, just after dawn, the inevitable attack. It's all over in less than an hour. The companies of 40 commandos systematically clear the enemy positions. Although one can't help feeling that, faced with such a formidable enemy for real, the Marines might be displaying a little less bravado and a bit more caution. With the war over and the dead restored, all anyone wants to do now is to get back to civilization, away from the relentless greenery, sodden clothes and aggressive insect life. Amid the fantasy conflict, they've also lived with the reality of a jungle campaign. Heat exhaustion, snake bites, deadfall injuries, malaria. The rounds might all have been blanks, but the rainforest has made no allowances for Setia Kawan being just an exercise. The value of the weeks of training in Brunei can only be calculated in military terms. The rather important spin-off of such a graphic demonstration of British expertise and effective hardware is a possible £60 billion worth of defence orders from the Sultanate, and a firmer-friendly foothold in Southeast Asia to counterbalance the loss of Hong Kong. And where better to celebrate a British military success than Singapore's Raffles Hotel, colonial symbol of an age when the Atlas was covered in British red. It's 25 years since 3 Commando Brigade was last in Far Eastern waters. This time when it leaves, the door will be left wide open for a speedy return.